Hello and welcome to the Meet the Parents podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 73 of the Meet the Parents podcast and another half an hour of parent-based chat. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and it's an all-dads affair this week as I'm joined by Mark from Best Dad I Can Be and Simon from Man vs Pink. Good evening, fellas.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So on this week's agenda, we're going to discuss Halloween and also explore what it's like to have an international best-selling book. Halloween. It's a day loved by kids as they go from door to door collecting enough sweets to last them for an entire year. More realistically, of course, they're all gone by the end of the week. Which means it's also the day to mark the patron saint of dentists. Okay, I just made that up, but it might as well be true. Actually, there really is a patron saint of dentistry. St. Apollonia was one of a group of virgin martyrs who, according to legend, was tortured by having all of her teeth violently pulled out or shattered. Nowadays, of course, we just feed our kids sweets, which has much the same effect. Anyhow, I digress. Mark, your kids have now flown the nest, but was Halloween ever an occasion where you did much with your kids over the years?
I think the answer to that, without sounding like a depressing northern killjoy, is no, not very much, because I think Halloween has really come into its own over the last 10 years. And by that time, our kids were probably out of the Halloween age group. I do kind of remember being a miserable old curmudgeon and resisting calls to decorate the house for Halloween.
You say it's changed a lot over the past 10 years or so, but in what ways would you say it's changed, and have those changes been for better or for worse?
It's certainly become more prevalent, hasn't it? People become are more ready to celebrate Halloween, I think. And I was reading that millennials are now the demographic which celebrates Halloween the most. So I think we can look forward to it being a self-awarded late summer, late autumn bank holiday almost, the way it's going. I'm fine with it. I quite like, and somebody did actually bang on my office door and gave me some sweets as they were promoting their business, so that was good. So yeah, I'm fine with it, and I quite like it. And I like the ancient traditions as well that it's originally based on.
And Simon, would you say that Halloween has changed much in your experience as well?
Yeah, goodness, it's definitely changed a lot. I remember being a kid, like carving out a Swede or something ridiculous because we didn't have pumpkins. And you know how hard a Swede is? It's just like I remember like spending days doing that. It was a nightmare. I've got this idea that I think the film E.T.'s got a lot to do with it, sowing the seeds of Halloween over here. So that was in 1982. So basically, any parent younger than me, which is plenty, so people in their sort of early 40s and younger would have seen E.T. as a child and seen, you know, the kind of Halloween stuff in that is kind of really iconic now. And that would have been their first introduction to the American idea of Halloween and fancy dress and trick-or-treating and it kind of like a festival on the streets almost. And it's kind of what it's become over here. And I think it's lovely, to be honest. I really like this one night of the year, and you see all the kids and families kind of celebrating the weird and the wonderful. And there's a kind of code going on as well. Like you don't go to every house. You just go to houses that have pumpkins out or have Halloween things up. It's almost like that's your signal that you're buying into the Halloween madness of the day, and you'll have sweets and the kids will go around and it's, I don't know, you kind of it's actually meeting lots of neighbours and other people in the area, which is really nice. And it's quite nice often when you get families that don't have kids or young kids celebrating as well. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's definitely changed, but I read a lot of bar humbug blogs and things this year from parent bloggers saying, oh, it's terrible, Halloween's not like it was in my day and it's all commercial, and I don't know, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's definitely a much bigger event than it used to be, isn't it? And much more Americanized, as you say. It used to be that people would buy a pumpkin or a sweet, and you'd get maybe a few kids going out trick-or-treating. Now it's a huge event for which retailers will happily sell us all manner of sweets, costumes, decorations, and all sorts of other paraphernalia. And now, instead of it just being a few kids, our estate at least is a seething mass of invading hordes of a size normally only possible with Game of Thrones CGI and makeup budgets. But I do agree that for the most part it's fun and it's good-natured, and it's an opportunity for kids to go out and celebrate the change of season.
That's the original origin of Halloween, that it was celebrating the end of summer, the end of autumn. The traders, the warriors were back from the summer looting, pillaging and trading, or whatever they'd been doing. And it was a celebration that had been successful and that winter was coming. And I think it's kind of nice that it's gone right back to that.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I guess one other thing that's changed is the whole concept of trick-or-treat, which is a bit of a misnomer these days, as it's basically no trick and all treat. I mean, again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just different, isn't it?
I'm fine with it. I like Simon, I like to see people dressed up. I think it's cool. I will give you, we talk about it being Americanization and things like that there is some way to go, because however much money the Brits spend on Halloween, Americans spend exactly that on Halloween costumes for their dogs and cats. So we have some distance to go to catch up with the land of the free.
I think that's absolutely true. So, Mark, obviously things are different now. You didn't have that many visitors this year, as you said. At the same time, you said there's a lot more people nowadays who welcome trick-or-treaters. And Simon, like you said, there's this unwritten code where people put out pumpkins and decorations and so on, so you know which houses are participating in trick-or-treating. So what did you do with your daughter to celebrate Halloween? I know how much she loves her costumes, so presumably she has an entire Halloween wardrobe of her own?
This year she went out as Kiki the Witch from the Studio Ghibli movie, Kiki's Delivery Service, who's a nice witch. And that's amazingly, one of the houses we knocked on, the girl recognised her as Kiki, which was great. Yeah, it made us both very happy. We just went out trick-or-treating with some of our friends. Actually, turned out quite a few friends, probably about 10 of them in the end, and accompanying parents. There was quite a big mass of us moving around. Yeah, they went out trick-or-treating, and then we came back home, and then we gave out our own sweets. Yeah, and thinking we were coming back late, because obviously, we'd been out on the young kids' kind of hours of 5 till 6 trick-or-treating. I think we'd missed most of the young trick-or-treaters, and actually there was plenty when we came back as well. And much like many other places and all I do is put the pumpkin out. You just put the pumpkin out and light it up, and that's it. They just come around knocking. Yeah, it's kind of a cliche about like all the sweets go in one night or something, but I think we're terribly strict parents, and we really limit how much sweets she has, and she kind of knows it. And we still had sweets. To be honest, we had sweets left from last year's Halloween in her kind of sweet basket. While she likes the acquiring of things, and she does like sweets, like any kid, most kids, she can discipline herself and accept kind of our sort of house rules of not gorging herself on sweets. So it's not, and from that perspective, it's not been that bad for us either.
Costumes, I guess, are something that's really changed a lot over the last few years. I remember when I was a kid, what costumes there were tended to be homemade by your mum out of black bin bags and safety pins. Now, they've always been witches and wizards at Halloween, of course, but nowadays there's obviously much more of a Harry Potter vibe to the costumes, and the impact of the Marvel superhero film franchises can clearly be seen as well. I mean, certainly round our way, I must have seen at least 15 to 20 Hulk masks, or Iron Man or Captain America costumes. Although I'm not really sure what the latter two have to do with Halloween anyway, other than it being another excuse to give those costumes another public outing. And that reminds me a little bit of a previous discussion we had a while back, Simon, about whether superhero costumes really fitted in with the spirit of World Book Day. But What the hell? Overall, it's fun, and it's nice to see and hear the kids being happy and excited in the streets. So, we'll let that one slide. And Mark, did you ever go out trick-or-treating with your kids?
I can't remember that we did. I don't ever remember doing that. Having said that, ask me again in 6 weeks' time, and I drove my children out remorselessly every year to go carol singing because I believed in the tradition. So I was lukewarm on Halloween at the time, but come carol singing, I did take them out, yes, and we went out and plodded round several streets until they'd made enough money to buy their Christmas presents. It's
interesting reflecting on it, though, that I was generally a Halloween grump, I think, before being a parent. And I was saying all the same things about it. Oh, it's just Americanized, and it's not something interesting, and it's not something we should be doing. I don't know, just another excuse for retailers to make money. Like all the things I'm kind of rolling my eyes at now, to be honest. Because now, I don't know, now as a parent, I kind of see a lot of positives in it, and I quite like this celebration of the kind of the weird and the supernatural, and also I think going back to what Mark was saying as well about the original reasons for it. Living in New Zealand for 4 years, I suddenly realised how much I missed the British seasons, and I've really had a great appreciation of it since coming back 4 years ago. It just feels like a really right thing to do at this time of year, to have Halloween and kind of go out and sort of celebrate the more macabre. And, no matter how many Captain Americas and things you see, there's still a lot of werewolves and ghouls and other, sort of supernatural icons going around. And it's almost like saying, the dark is coming. We don't need to be scared of it. We can celebrate it. This is almost like one of the first years I really got it and really appreciated it.
I was just going to ask you that. I mean, with your children being, Tim, yours younger, and Simon, your daughter being younger, do you discuss with them werewolves and ghouls and the afterlife and the day in the year when the dead walk among us and things like that? Because Halloween is celebrated not just in the UK. I mean, it's a worldwide festival almost. This idea of a day when the spirits of the dead walk among us. So do the children ask about that, or do they just get dressed up and go out for sweets?
They've talked about it at school. I know definitely about the sort of my daughter talked about a day of celebrating the dead, is how she phrased it. And to be fair, I don't know enough about the other traditions around the world. I'm aware of the Day of the Dead, but not much beyond that. So we talked about it in those terms, and really, I talked about it from my perspective, as I was just saying earlier about I think lots of these festivals around the year are kind of to do with the seasons. Like, we can talk about the religious aspect of Easter, but I'd like to talk about it in terms of spring and the sense of the idea of rebirth and what that means coming out of winter, things like that. So it's more like, I think I just like to bring in different ideas into conversation, and then she can kind of make her own mind up about what it means to her, I guess.
Yeah, and similarly with our kids, they've covered it in school as well, which I guess has then prompted conversations with us. In fact, in truth, they probably know more about the origins and traditions of Halloween than we do. But very much like you, Simon, I find my attitude towards Halloween has changed since becoming a parent. Now, I used to be pretty indifferent to it, but now I make a point of getting home from work early. So my wife takes the kids out trick-or-treating while I man the sweet bucket and answer the front door. I mean, if nothing else, it means my Fitbit gets to register a few hundred more steps as I shuttle to and from our front door for an hour and a half or so. I guess in the interest of balance, I should also note that not everyone is necessarily a Halloween fan. Some people do bemoan the rampant Americanization and, the commercialism gone mad. And certainly where we used to live, pre-kids, we were close to a less than salubrious council estate from which we would get groups of teenage boys chancing their arm in search of sweets and even egging the houses of people who didn't play ball. It was a small minority, absolutely, but it didn't exactly make me feel all warm and fuzzy about Halloween at that time. And we had elderly neighbours as well who essentially were forced to sit quietly inside their house all evening with the lights off to avoid being terrorised, and that's a real shame. And the other thing from a parent's perspective is it can be difficult, can't it, when people are constantly knocking on your door while you're trying to get a baby or a toddler to sleep, and we all love it when that happens, don't we?
I guess I think from all those points, that's just never been in my experience of it. The older kids sort of trying it on a bit, or I've not heard of like elderly families around here being, besieged or anything, besieged, but bothered in the night, or families who trying to put kids to sleep because of that code, that idea of if you have the lit pumpkins or the pumpkins outside, then that means you're ready to come, to receive trick or treaters, and if you don't, then you're just left alone.
And my experience is that it's varied significantly, and it's really all about the location of where you live. So, for instance, now we're in the middle of a modern housing estate populated by a lot of young families. So everyone understands and follows the conventions, and it's very much as you described, Simon. The atmosphere's fun and peaceful, and nobody really gets bothered who doesn't want to be. But our old place it had the fun with the younger kids early doors, and then a few older kids who basically soured the evening for everyone later on. And yeah, like I say, it all depends where you happen to live, I guess. Anyhow, we've survived another Halloween. So next year, maybe we won't send the kids out trick-or-treating, and we'll just sit them down and make them watch the Saw movies instead. Or maybe Alvin and the Chipmunks meet Frankenstein. Although, to be honest, I'm not sure which of the two is the more terrifying prospect. Over the course of the past year and a half or so, we've intermittently touched on Mark's father and son trek across the Pennine Way in the summer of last year. First he was planning and training for it, then he did it, then he started writing a book about it, and then more recently he finally published it to widespread acclaim, not all of it restricted solely to his own household. But more recently, the book has scaled the heights of the top of the Amazon charts in Canada, not to mention major markets such as the Marshall Islands, Liechtenstein and Andorra. In all seriousness though, in some respects it feels like the podcast team and our listeners have been with you every step of the way. Well, give or take 90 miles of actual walking, some of it trouserless. So, Mark, remind us why you decided to do the walk in the first place.
Do you know, Tim, I still don't know. I was sitting at the dining room table exactly where I'm sitting now. I must have had this idea bubbling away, and I just texted Alex. I said, come downstairs, there's something I want to ask you. Do you want to come for a walk with me? I wanted to do a physical challenge before I was too old for a physical challenge. I wanted to spend some time with Alex before he went away to university. I expected him to say, no, don't be ridiculous, Dad. Can't possibly spend 5 days with you. He simply shrugged and said, yeah, sure, let's do that. I expected my wife to talk us out of it. She said, that's a great idea, off you go. And that was it. Once you made the commitment, you've made the commitment. And a few weeks later, I'd paid the deposits for the B&Bs, and that was it. We were committed. All I had to do was really get fit enough to do it.
Mark, one thing. Did you say you texted your son who was upstairs? Yeah,
of course. How else do you communicate?
This is why you need to go for a walk. You didn't go up and talk to him. You texted him to come downstairs.
Yes. When they're all home, we text them all. I mean, I've got a fantastic relationship with Alex in that we talk about everything. But if a teenager is upstairs in their bedroom playing music, you can stand at the bottom of the stairs and shout for 30 minutes. The simplest way to get their attention is to send them a text. And our house is on 3 floors, so Dan is right at the top. So, it's far... I suppose I can say I did 90 miles on the Pennine Way, but I can't be bothered to walk to the top of the house, So, yes, we just text and say, dinner's ready, come downstairs,
Once you'd made the decision to actually do the walk, what then made you decide to turn it into a book?
Well, I was writing a few bits and bobs about it on the blog, but it seemed such a natural subject for a book. And I've always read Bill Bryson books, and I've always thought that my style of writing was similar to Bill Bryson's style of writing. So it always struck me that there was a book there. That was it, really. I always, and I made notes through all the training, and I sat every night in the B&B and made a few notes once I dried my clothes out and things like that. So, yeah, there was always going to be a book there. And also, I felt that I owed it to Alex to record it, because I'm always conscious that I'm writing not just for my children, but for the children my kids will have one day. So I did want to record it for future generations, if that doesn't sound too grand.
Yeah, and the book is not so much about the walk itself, is it, as about your father-son relationship and the shared experience that you had with Alex.
Yeah, it's not a book about walking. It's a book about a father-son relationship told against the background of walking. I make it very clear at the start of the book that if you want a serious guidebook, then you're reading the wrong book. If you want to be entertained and read a father-son story, then that's the book for you, yeah.
So how did you go about the process of actually writing the book?
I really did it in the evenings. Obviously you've got, the day job. So I was really doing it in the evenings, and if I'm critical of myself, in a fairly haphazard way. So the original intention was that the book came out in June or July, and it ended up coming out at the beginning of October. I guess I could have had it out earlier, but I'm a bit of an obsessive editor, and I have this horror that somebody comes back to me and says, I found a typo, or you've made a mistake here. So there was quite a lot of rewriting involved as well.
So did you find that writing the book was in any way different to the process you've been following for so many years writing blog posts?
No, I don't think I did, really. It was nice as a writer to do it, because I was writing in my own natural voice. I still wanted to do the very best book that I could, and therefore, hence, lots of edit, lots of rewrites. But no, the process, the style of writing was exactly the same as I use in Best Dad and everything else.
Simon, have you ever felt the inclination to go from writing a blog to writing a book? And if so, any idea what it is that you might want to write about?
I've never felt really an idea of sort of directly transitioning from the blog to a book. I've been approached a few times, but not like properly by publishers, more like people who are, I don't know, almost looking to pitch things to small publishers or something. Like, it's not something I've really considered, and it's, a lot of my posts, I don't know if it would really suit a book format. They all, I tend to write things as almost as self-contained pieces, and a book, I don't know, should link up more. But the other thing with me writing is it's not something I really did much before I was a blogger. Like I wrote stuff for television, but it's really sort of very short scripts and for voiceovers and presenters and that kind of thing. Actually, undertaking the blog was a very different type of writing for me. So even, to be honest, just doing that is quite a big leap for me. Yeah, I just don't think I have the discipline to write a book. And when I say that in terms of fitting it in with everything else, whether it was me being a full-time parent or now sort of fitting in a day job around all that as well. And I think if I ever did do any kind of book, I'd much rather like to try fiction, I suppose. I often make notes about stories in various notebooks I have lying around, and one day I have this idea that I'll turn one of them or something into something more. As yet, hasn't really gone beyond that.
I guess I've toyed with the idea of writing a book about the realities of modern fatherhood a few times over the years, but I don't think I've ever managed more than about 3 or 4 chapters, and realistically I think it's probably just one of those pipe dreams that's probably never going to happen now, but you never know. We'll see. And looking at the wider market, we're seeing big growth in a new kind of parenting book over the past 2 to 3 years, with books by the likes of The Unmumsy Mum, Hurrah for Gin, and Mother Pucker. More recently, even dads are starting to get in on the act. Matt Coyne's Dummy topped the Sunday Times bestseller list, while in the last few weeks Sam Avery's Confessions of a Learner Parent has been launched, and that's a particularly funny read. Having more books sharing both the harsh realities and the funnier side of parenting can only be a good thing, I guess. Now, all the aforementioned books focus on being, I guess, what you'd call hyper-real, and laying bare some of the more absurd and less pretty aspects of parenting life. Simon, have you read any of these parent blogger turned authors books? And is there anything in particular about them that you do or don't like?
I haven't read any of them, I'm afraid. And I don't have any interest in it, to be honest. I can't really say it beyond that. And it might just be as simple as a very basic reaction to I haven't read all of those people's blogs, but some of them I know more than others. And just a reaction to, would I pay for something that I've been reading for free? Yeah, it might just be that simple. And also there's not, there's only so much time in the day I've got to read as it is. And for every parent blogger book I read, that's one less Star Wars book I get to read. So, so no, I can't really comment on that. I mean, it's great they're getting deals, and a good writer's a good writer, and it's good that that's getting recognised. And if they've got a good following, there seems to be a market for their book. So good luck to them.
Mark, how about you? Have you read any of these?
No, I haven't read any of the books. I do think it's a good thing that they're there, and I think people are ready for parenting advice, which is less perfect and reflects real life. We're perhaps living in a time now where people are quite prepared to admit that they are less than perfect parents who are simply just doing the best job that they can.
I think it's certainly made a nice change from the Gina Ford style book that tells you how to be a perfect parent in 983 easy steps. It'll be interesting to see where the market goes next and what the next big thing will be. Maybe the next big thing in parenting books should be a tale about, I don't know, a dashing dad blogger, podcaster and parody songwriter. Nah.
Yeah, who's a secret agent in his spare time. I think that's, I can see the film now, I obviously see you playing yourself, Tim, with Emma Watson as your wife. Yes, I see it perfectly.
So before we go, what have we been up to recently? Mark?
Oh, we had a nice weekend last weekend. We drove, both Dan and Eleanor both find themselves in Leeds now. Dan's doing a PhD and Eleanor's started her first real job. And coincidentally, they're both in Leeds, so we were able to drive through and take them both out for Sunday lunch, which was a pleasure. I noticed that despite the fact that they're both now getting paid, I appeared to pay for lunch, but there we are. I should expect that, shouldn't I?
How about you, Simon?
The only kind of out of the ordinary thing I've done recently was I was invited to appear on a panel about gender equality, but the interesting thing, it was run by a very large law firm called, I think, Norton Rose Fulbright. Yeah, and they were doing a panel about gender equality and kind of relating to the legal profession and their firm. And really, they were just looking at the idea of, what they can do to combat the lack of gender equality in the workplace, and as we're equating both to men and women. So, for instance, just in terms of men, encouraging more of them to take parental leave and that kind of thing, and flexible working, and what they can do to help encourage sort of stay-at-home parents to come back, and that kind of, it was really interesting. The conversation was really about the people coming into the law profession. They're just demanding a different type of working environment. So anyway, that was just something fascinating for me to be a part of, and that's just something that comes out of being on the blog. I just kind of took it up as a different experience, and it was quite quite an eye-opening one.
No, it's interesting. As for us, we were away at Butlins for a few days at the end of half-term week. Lots of swimming, lots of time feeding coins into machines at the amusement arcades, and lots of fairground rides. Now, it might be a pretty basic experience compared to many of the other things we do with the kids, but they absolutely love it, and I have to say it has a lot going for it. It's very much a break for the benefit of the kids, but there's nothing wrong with that at all, I don't think. And that's it for this episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the three of us online. Mark?
I'm on Twitter at bestdadicanbe, and the website for the book is markrichards.co.uk.
And Simon?
I blog as Man vs Pink, Man vs Pink, and you can find me manvspink.com and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And you can find me at slouchingtowardsthatcham.com and across social media at ThatchamDad. You can download this podcast on iTunes and on Android devices from our website at meettheparentspodcast.com and via a variety of podcasting apps. You can also follow us on Twitter at ParentsPodcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. So thanks for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.